Hi everyone, my name is Nick Scott from the Ontario Youth Film Festival. Thank you for joining us today for the first seminar in our Youth Filmmaking 101 series this season. We're excited to bring you what will no doubt be an informative discussion on FX makeup for film. This seminar is live, so we encourage students, educators, and anyone else watching to ask questions using our chat. We will have time at the end of our discussion to post some of your questions to our guest, so keep them coming. And now I'd like to introduce today's special guest, makeup effects artist Anthony Veilleux. Anthony has always been immersed in many different art forms and mediums, from fine art sculpture, tattooing, and painting, to working on big budget films such as Pacific Rim, Death Race, 300, and many more. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Anthony to our seminar today. Hi, Anthony, how's it going?
Great. Morning,
Great.
Nick.
Morning. So Anthony, tell us where you're talking to us from today. That looks pretty interesting behind you.
Yeah, this is my little world, basically. My studio, what I call my sort of dirty room, where I can make molds and work on larger projects, as larger as in head size and bigger. I like to surround myself with inspiration and ongoing projects. So there's always something on my plate, which keeps me nice and busy.
Cool. And so just briefly, what are we seeing behind you quickly? Just what are these molds and that kind of stuff that we're seeing?
I'm not sure how much of the screen everyone else can see. They probably see a full screen, right? Not just the slice. So yeah, right behind me, the sort of flesh-colored witch kind of character. That's one of my masks. So that started as a clay sculpture. Molds were made. I have a rubber copy now. She just hasn't been painted yet. The pinkish figure with the lopsided eyes, that's another one of my sculptures. And that you can see is more finished. So that has a painted face and glossed eyes and so on. The white castings that just look like a white face, those are usually that's where we start a project. So a casting of an actor's face, and then from that we can work and make whatever it is we want to make. So we always need to start with that, what we call the armature or live casting. The snarly bugger on my left, that's a werewolf head that I had sculpted as a little background piece for the film Mortal Instruments. And I'm just working on getting him haired. So yeah, it's just a few pieces. You can probably just make out little Linda Blair behind me too, sort of to my right side, underneath the yellowish zombie face.
Yes.
That's a thing of Linda Blair from The Exorcist, from the 70s version.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's just a small smattering of one corner. The rest of the room is all molds and, again, works in progress and a lot more face casts.
Yeah, great.
We kind of collect them. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I know we've talked about that before, but yes, you kind of collect some of them and have a few classics and that kind of stuff too. So yeah, that's great.
So most effects people are kind of into them, so you can sort of get a cool one, trade it with another cool one, and then you end up with a little library's worth where, it's like, oh, I'll trade you one of those for one of these. It's like the old hockey card days of got it, need it. So
yeah, that's right. That's fun. So, and you must have a few rare ones that I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're less rare once you know how to make a mold, because that means you can make as many copies as you want. It's just acquiring that first one. That's the tough part, because some people hang on to them, with a tight grip.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. That's great. So, Anthony, I just want to get into some questions and just get started right off the top of the first question I have for you is if you could kind of explain to our audience what is special effects makeup?
Oh, if you think of makeup in general, it's usually to accent or cover up or change a character. So for an actor to go into a role, if they're cast close to what they need, then they don't have to do too much. But once you have an actor who has to transform, change, and still retain some of their own character, then that's when a special effects makeup artist usually gets called. So something as simple as a beat up makeup, black eyes and a swollen cheek and a broken nose is going to be sort of done with paint and highlights and shadows. But then as soon as you start getting further out from that, then you're starting to add to the actor's face. So a special effects makeup artist would get the script and they would break down what they see as, actor gets shot. Oh, okay. Are we going to see that happen? Are we going to see the aftermath? So we're going to have to produce something that's going to show. If an actor has to age for a production, then again, like the one white cast above me as well is a casting of David Bowie's makeup from the film The Hunger. So David Bowie had to go through all that transformation. So that's the world of the special effects makeup artist, that we are usually creating something that involves an actor, but it got to the point, especially in the 80s with the heyday of really cool monster movies and a lot more transformations, where the special effects makeup artist was called in to work on puppets and animatronics and much beyond just having an actor's face. So that's usually where special makeup effects or an effects artist or makeup effects differs from being the makeup artist. The makeup artist tends to just bring out the best of a character, or they try to hide the signs of life and hard living sometimes on an actor.
Cool. Great. Okay. So when did you first become interested in special effects makeup, Anthony?
I think it goes back to theater, being interested in theater when I was a kid. My granddad was in theater in Holland in like the 40s. So I remember seeing pictures of him on stage where he had like a really dark shadow and, sort of 5 o'clock shadow and dark around his eyes and, very dramatic sort of, if you think of black and white films, like looking like a bad guy. So I remember seeing that as a kid and getting one of his old makeup books from the 30s and 40s and thinking it was pretty neat, interesting stuff. Always being a creative, artistic kid that appealed to me. And then it was seeing things like, a lot of makeup effects people always go to things like King Kong, stop motion animation films, which was also very inspirational for the creativity of it, the fantasy part of it. But then there were movies, and in my case, to be honest, the television series Second City Television, the Canadian cast, John Candy and Eugene Levy and all that group, and Joe Flaherty, seeing the makeup that they did on that show on what was ostensibly almost a live television program, the makeups were fantastic. Canadian artist named Beverly Schechtman, who I met years ago, and as this sort of, on at the time, probably long-haired, sort of crazy-looking art dude, meeting this lovely older lady, and I was just such a fan, and she was a little taken aback until I, sort of told her how inspirational her work was. Whereas, as I said, most effects makeup people can go back to like The Exorcist and American Werewolf in London and things like that, which were inspiring, but seeing that combination of humor, creativity, and getting to see those actors like lap that stuff up, like really bring her makeups to life. That was one of my biggest inspirations when I was younger, to want to make my own characters.
Awesome. Oh, okay. That's great. I also thought, I don't know if you were a fan of Hilarious House of Frightenstein as well, that was done out of Hamilton, but they did a really great job with their effects, makeup, and everything too. So around the same time as Second City, but
Exactly. And I think as kids, we probably spent a little bit more time in front of the television than going to movie theaters, and the movies when I was a little kid were, like a lot of war movies and Westerns. And, as a kid, you're not getting to see anything that's R-rated or too creepy and scary. So, television kind of brought it home, literally, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anthony, what kind of training do you have?
It's interesting. Most artists, it tends to be self-taught. It's a point of interest. When you're younger, you start to explore these ideas. So for myself, it was a curiosity and the creativity. There was no internet. There was none of that. There was a couple film magazines. The one Cine Magic was a fabulous little publication that gave you real information, like actual recipes and real information on how to make things. But so most of it was all my own, a lot of trial and error, a lot of allowances spent on buying material that I had to kind of use a magnifying glass and look at pictures and magazines to sort of see like, oh, that's what that is in the background. That must be what they used. So there's a lot of that. But when I finally had the opportunity, when I was, in my late teens, to go to art school, that was a real solidifying factor because it allowed me not to have to experiment so much on my own. Finally use material that was in a bigger bag instead of me buying things in little tiny containers, and having peers and having teachers that could help steer me, give me some actual information, hands-on. So art school really helped me solidify the other elements of it. I think my most valuable training was definitely I studied, took a makeup class with the head of CBC Manitoba, a fellow named Philip Benson. Great guy. He was the head of makeup for CBC Manitoba. And he had a theatrical supply store. And I went to the theatrical supply store to buy some makeup supplies, found out he had a class. I took his class, learning everything from straight makeup, corrective makeup, to sort of an introduction to prosthetics. So as he put it, and put it beautifully, he said, you can sculpt the best monster in the world, but if you can't paint it and make it look real, then it's a piece of rubber. And I think actually behind me is a perfect example of that, seeing just the rubber witch versus the sort of lop-eyed dude when he has the color. You can see if you can't make that step, if you don't understand skin, then you really can't make a good creature.
Yeah, of course, for sure. Actually, I just want to jump into a question really quick, Anthony, because I think it applies a little bit. But we've got somebody asking, what are your thoughts on practical prosthetics versus CGI gore makeup? Do you think CGI? And I'm sure you have a lot to say, but do you think CGI is getting close enough to compete, or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's the big kettle of fish. Like, look out. The marriage of the both is always the most effective.
Sure.
I don't think there's a practical artist or a digital artist that would really disagree with that. When you can marry the both, they're fabulous. The results are better than anything else. The uncanny valley, I think, for most practical artists in particular, we're not a fan because it is what it is. It's pixels. It's not real. And whether you can tell or not, your brain knows. When you see the end of one of the more recent Star Wars, where all of a sudden they pop up with the photorealistic Princess Leia, you're taken out of the moment because you're trying to figure it out. So if it takes you out of the moment, that's not good storytelling. It stops it. So again, it's the marriage of both. And a lot of practical effects artists, a lot of practical sculptors are more interested now in what they can do digitally and how it can enhance what they do. And so I hope, that was always our hope, that more practical artists from a practical background would get interested in the digital world and sort of inject that creativity and that love for discovery. And no offense to a lot of the digital artists, but they came at it from like a gaming world in a lot of cases. And then what happens is the end result may look astonishing, I guess. But as I said, it takes you out of the moment. It takes you out of the storytelling aspect.
For sure. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Thanks. Anthony, we're just going to take a few moments and we're going to show the audience a few pictures that you've supplied to me that we put together from past productions and stuff like that. So I know these pictures are sometimes taken like on set, but they're also used for your purposes, correct? To kind of show people, or for continuity purposes as well and stuff. But if you want to just kind of start talking and telling us what we're seeing here, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can give a quick caption basically. So on the film 300, there were so many characters, so many actors that we needed to divide them up. That was my guy, Cody, hilarious sort of snowboard guy from Vancouver. that every day it was, good morning, Cody. Morning, Anthony. What are we doing today? Where are you in the story? Are you dead? Are you being killed? Is this fresh? Is this, later in the story? So there was all of that going on. So every day I would meet with Cody and we would do his makeup. And the other shot is me on set. So again, you can see Cody on the right, sitting in his loincloth, and me at his knees, at his beck and call, sort of doing his daily makeup. And then on the left is just a compilation of, depending on the day, various characters and having to sort of set them up for, big battle scenes, either pre-death or post-death.
Okay, cool. And then you were kind of touching them up as the day would progress and sort. Yeah. Okay, great. Awesome. So this looks like, if you want to tell us what this is from?
Yeah, this was actually a production in London at the Grand Theatre of Beauty and the Beast. So I got contacted to do some work on that. I produced a series of silicone appliances that could be reused because obviously with the amount of production dates, they couldn't have somebody come in and do makeup every day for that. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't afford to have a different piece for every day. So the silicone appliances were more durable, so they could put them on, clean them off, and reuse them.
Okay, cool. That's great.
Oh, and then a fun compilation of just various zombies from George Romero's Land of the Dead. That was a really fun production to work on. Everyone was so looking forward, and depending on the day, you had anywhere from 2 to 3 zombies to 20 to 30 zombies, and it would just almost be like an assembly line process. You sit in your chair, they'd bring in a stunt person, and you do their makeup, and then boom, next one in, and you just keep rotating through. Mostly night shoot, so we'd start the day in the afternoon. So our call was maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then we'd have all our actors out by 3 to 4. And then, usually they'd break for dinner at that point, and then they'd start shooting as soon as it started to get a little bit dark out. And then it would just shoot till breakfast, till morning, till the sun came up.
Wow. So I mean, it's important for people to know that you guys are there, before the cameras obviously start rolling and everything, but you're there long after as well to make sure that there's any touch-ups that are necessary and all that kind of stuff too. So
yeah. The last images were from Mortal Instruments, so just showing the finished makeups, and on the right side showing from the sculpture to the prosthetics to the finished makeup. And you're not often lucky enough to be able to do, as an effects artist, to do the sculpture and the application and the finish. A lot of times I'm usually brought in as a sculptor. I'll do the sculpture and then that's it. I don't see it finished. Some other makeup artist ends up carrying it through the rest of the process. So that show was kind of nice because there was a few makeups that I got to start to finish. And it's always fun because you want to see what your sculpture is going to look like on the actor.
Yeah, of course. Okay, because you're working at things at different stages sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, just some fun stuff with that Pacific Rim. I got to work on that, and that's the original Resident Evil 2. So the Nemesis, the center group with our little posed for sculpture gang. Any project is almost always a group of people that we have to work together. So you kind of go all the way around the sculpture. Sometimes you'll concentrate in one area, and then somebody else will come in and tune that up, and then you go over to another part of the sculpture and tune that up, and sort of going back and forth. So you if you want to be successful and you want to be happy, you definitely leave your ego at the door, because if you can't deal with somebody else touching your work, then you're going to have a tough time. You have to realize that it's art directed. There's somebody else looking at your piece saying more of this and less of that. As much as you love it, you can't fall in love with it. You have to be willing to take it in another direction if you're told. That's what you're paid for.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's a big, it goes the same for all filmmaking, that it's a team effort, and you've kind of got a little bit of a hierarchy to work under, but you can't be too precious with your work.
Yeah. Yes, they're hard at work underneath the liquor.
Yeah, underneath that, yeah.
Yeah, these sculptures are huge and very, very heavy. You can see by the form underneath 2x4s that he's well supported. But, in order to lift it up to sculpt the belly, that's a lot more effort than just, throwing one of us, myself, on the ground, and I could work on the belly until, somebody else is working on the other side. And then you can see on the other side, there's, the finished piece. And then the board above is kind of interesting. It was for a film called Anti-Birth, I think it was called, the Canadian low-budget film. And they made the monster differently. They sculpted all his body sort of parts separately and then kind of put them together, glued them to a spandex suit so the actor could wear that instead of having a cast of an actor and then sculpting everything over top. They just did everything in segments. So in a sense, you could do like a fun cut and paste. It was a different approach, but it was effective in the end.
Cool. Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Nature the Beast, I think that's what it was, right? N-O-T, yeah, Nature of the Beast. It was a Disney ABC production, and that's the lovely Eddie K. Thomas from American Pie fame and from the television show Scorpion. And he was our werewolf. So, you get pretty intimate with these actors because you're the one seeing them at 5 a.m, doing their makeup for 2 to 3 hours, and then for the rest of the day maintaining it. So when he has to use the bathroom, I have to take his gloves off. When he wants a drink, I literally have to pour it into his mouth because his dentures, his fake teeth are so big that he couldn't really use his lips properly. Full contact lenses, the costume, the prosthetics, the hair work, amazing stuff. And when you have an actor, Eddie was awesome. Like, it's a godsend to have an actor who can work the stuff and wants to be in it and understands it's not going to be comfortable. So those are, some fun goofball behind the scenes shots of us all working on that show. There's a lot of long hours, so you do have to find the humor and find your break. So that's me wearing a set of the arms, pretending to paint one of the feet. So yeah, just there's a lot of fun backstage behind the scenes because you have to let off some steam sometimes.
Yeah, long days for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is some of your tattoo work. I don't know if people know too much, but if you want to speak about the tattoo work you've done for films.
I've been a tattoo artist, sort of a full-time artist, since the early 90s. And it was a great marriage for me when I finally sort of started to get requests to design tattoos for film work, because it's really easy for me to understand how to do it because it's what I do every day. But for the makeup artists and the production companies that hire me, they also have the advantage of having somebody who knows what they should look like in real life. So I've had the opportunity to work on a couple really good productions where, I go again with an art director, usually from the director to the art director to the makeup effects person that I'm usually hired under to do the designs. So I will create the artwork, create variations in the artwork, as in making them look older, more faded, so they show as real on the skin. And then they make literally like a stick-on tattoo for the actor to wear. Sometimes it can last a couple days, but usually they run enough that they can put new ones on every day. And that, again, becomes the makeup artist's job, whereas I'm sort of the designer. So yeah, it's a really, that one makes me happy just because it's a really fun job, and I'm working one-on-one with usually the makeup artist, and sometimes the director, will help to direct me into things like that. So yeah, that's a really fun job, and I can do it at home, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, of course, for sure.
That's one of the evil fairies from Mortal Instruments. So again, the sculpture is the top picture in brown. It looks like chocolate. So we sculpt that over a cast of the actress's teeth. Then we make acrylic copies, and then there she is modeling them. So it was a fun little quick moment in the film that she sort of walks by camera and gives somebody a smile, and you sort of notice something is amiss with those that pretty girl's teeth.
Yeah, for sure, and it's something different too. I guess it seems, something else that you're doing instead of just makeup. It's for somebody's mouth on this one. So
yeah, and the teeth and the eyes, you change those, and you've changed the entire character, right? It's such a simple change for us, and it's something like you watch a film where someone has a beat up makeup and they have like a broken blood vessel in the eye. So they'll just put in a contact that has the reddish tone, and it gives you almost a visceral reaction. It's so subtle, but you're like, ow, that looks so uncomfortable. And it's such a great way to give so much character with such a simple little touch.
Yeah, of course, for sure. Can you just speak briefly, Anthony, to us about kind of some of the techniques and some of the materials that you kind of deal with in the makeup industry?
I mean, a lot of it's sort of standard and really traditional in terms of we use plaster and clay. That's where it sort of started. So again, a plaster life mask of an actor. Used to be taken with alginate, which was the dental impression material that a dentist would use to cast teeth. You use that to mold a face because it's safe, and then you have a plaster copy, and then you sculpt over top of it. So the clay, there's variations in clay. There's water-based clay and oil-based clay, plasticine, stuff that, I think most kids have played with at some point in their life. One from there, then you're making a mold of it. So the mold is plaster or it's silicone, depending on the end result. Then once you've made a mold, then you make the copy. So then the copy becomes made of latex rubber if it's a mask, or you can make latex for little bullet holes and small wounds. You can use latex for just building up on a character directly on their face. Latex isn't the nicest stuff. It's an ammonia-based rubber in a sense, but it's relatively harmless. So we use a lot of that, and then it becomes, from there you get foam latex, which is a whole other process, which is a foamed material that will fill up the void that the sculpture had before. So again, like the face behind me, if that were a sculpture, underneath it is a cast of my face. So I could have, if I had a mold on the outside, I would fill up that void inside that used to be clay with foam. Then you have a more flexible, just more versatile material to work with. And then from foam, now we got into silicone. And silicone is sort of the industry standard because it's slightly translucent. You can color it inside and outside. So you can actually color the material. They call it intrinsically. So you add pigment to it inside. So when it comes out, you actually have a material that reads like skin. Light will be absorbed by it and slightly bounce off of it. So it's a wonderful material now for film, especially with HD and 4K and everything else. It's like I said, it reads it the same way that skin does. Whereas rubber and foam, you always have to light it a little differently and so on, because it didn't absorb any light. Light bounced off of it. So again, for what we do, we have to know that as well. It's not just that we're making monsters. We have to kind of figure out, okay, what's the shot? When is it shot? Sometimes we have to change the color of an appliance. It might not look right to the eye, but it'll shoot properly because it's outdoors, or it's, the subtleties of that we have to understand. So as far as the material goes, it usually comes down to, in the end, what's on camera? What do they need to see? And that will dictate, sort of going back, how we make it and what material it's made from.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense, because I know that we've all seen shots of, like, what a final product in a film looks like, and then what a behind the scenes shot looks like, and you're like, wow, the lighting is completely different. How did they make that shot and everything? So I mean, that's the same considerations for makeup, is what's it going to look like, the way it's being shot, and under those lighting conditions.
Yeah, and again, as you said, with the team effort, it's, you have to have a good relationship with a DOP. You should, all those relationships, even though everybody thinks their job is the focus, is the only important thing sometimes, it really does, the best result is going to come from an art director who understands, and the makeup person who understands some lighting, and the lighting person who understands the makeup part, and the DOP who's going to understand how to photograph that and be able to communicate. And the communication part, sadly, is an effort sometimes, because again, everyone's department is the most important department until something else happens, and then the blame game starts. But if everyone, it sounds a little corny, but obviously if everyone can work together, the end result's always going to be better.
Of course, yeah. I'm using that as a segue. And then can you tell us kind of what is the hierarchy in a makeup department on film sets and on film productions?
Okay. It all depends. Again, you have key makeup, and the key makeup artist, the word key is just that. It starts and ends with them in most cases. So they're hired to get their crew together and to schedule their crew and to make sure that everybody, is covered. Usually the key might have a relationship with the director or producers, but sometimes a key is also hired by an effects studio. So imagine if you have a script and you have these creatures and you have all this other stuff and you're trying to figure out where to go with it. You would usually get a hold of a production company. So you'd get a hold of, one of the bigger companies in LA, or, you get in touch with a company in Toronto. There's the company I do a lot of work for now called AAFX, so Applied Effects, and wonderful work. And so it would start with him. He would now help with the designers, get together with the art directors, and then he would start to put a crew together to build everything. During that process is also when he's going to be looking for a key. So from the key makeup artist, they're hiring, sometimes they will have what's called their assistant makeup artist. So that's going to be 1 or 5 or 10, depending how many people and what the scale of the production is. And then you also have, in an effects studio, then there's, a lead sculptor who takes the lead on things, usually is the one that gets the gravy job. So he gets to do the face, or, the more dramatic stuff. And then the other sculptors are the ones who are sort of building it up from there. And then you have the mold makers and fabricators. So there is a hierarchy in the sense that a day player makeup artist is pretty much called in because they just have a lot of work and they need another set of hands and a good set of eyes. But you're not really going to have much say in anything. You're told what chair you're sitting in and how many actors you have to do, and that's about it. And then you're on set sort of maintaining them for the rest of the day, and you're there for the removal at the end of the day. But usually, it's the key makeup artist that is the one that, again, is going to take the fall if something doesn't work, and they're the ones that will happily take the credit when it does work.
Of course, for sure. Anthony, can you tell our audience how you got your first job? I mean, do you have to build up a resume? Do you have like examples of your work to kind of get you? How did you get your foot in the door when you on your first production, and then and how did you get into other productions from there? Is it key going after like you said, a makeup effects company first? Are you just trying to get on set and get into the department? Kind of what was your progression in your career?
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of pattern. I had been doing it all on my own for fun. So there's a genuine love for creating this stuff. Working in theater, you can volunteer. That's one of the coolest parts, is you volunteer to work in theater a lot of times until you get better, and then you can start asking for money, and they can at least cover costs in a lot of cases. So it helps you build up your portfolio. To show up somewhere with a lot of drive and gumption and aspiration is great. It's useful, and we all appreciate that. But proof of what you can do is going to be very helpful. So by building up a portfolio of diversity, again, a diverse artist is more useful because you can put them, if you're looking to hire somebody, you can put them where you need them, as opposed to if you only do the one thing and we've already got somebody who does that, that's it. Then they've got no use for you. This is going back in the 90s, so I had to scour every phone books from Toronto. There was a few production lists that you can find, by getting a hold of production companies in Toronto, like the ones who are producing films. And so you find out these names, scour to find their addresses. What I made was what's called a comp sheet. So you take your best pictures, you put them on one sheet of paper, almost like a big postcard, and then you have a mini resume sort of on the back of it, and you send them to companies. You blind send them. You just get 20 copies made and 20 envelopes and address them if you want. Back in the day, we had what was called the SAISY, which was a self-addressed stamped envelope, and you would put that inside as well. So they had no excuse. If they liked what they saw, they could throw their business card in that envelope, say, give us a call, and send it back to you. So I did that for months and months and months, just sent this stuff out. And finally I got one reply. It's kind of embarrassing to think like the amount I sent out to have one reply, but it was a good reply. It was from Paul Jones Effects in Toronto. And Paul Jones said, I like what I see. If you're available, I've got a couple productions coming up, if you're interested. And I said right away, I was like, yes, I am. But to make it stick, I made a magnet, and I took a sculpture, one of my smaller scale sculptures, and created this sort of little creature head on a magnet. So I took a real resin head and I blended it out onto this magnet-sized business card, and I carved my name in it with that looked like it was carved, and I painted it, and then I sent that to him in a box that also had some monster artwork that I had drawn on the outside, and put that in another envelope and sent that back, and gave him all my contact information and everything else. And he got it and called me right away and said, wow, this is awesome. I put the magnet up on my filing cabinet right next to me, and I've got this show coming up. And at the time, it was the original Ginger Snaps film that he was working on. Cool. So it was, can you come to Toronto and work? So I was like, yes, I will clear my schedule. I didn't really have a schedule at the time to clear, but he didn't need to know that. And I couch surfed for about 3 to 4 weeks, sculpted in his shop. He brought me in and basically said, this is the maquette, so a small scale version of the werewolf. And they needed me to just rework that a bit and then start sculpting the legs for it. So that was my gig. I came in to sculpt the legs, and from that worked on some of the body, worked on, I think, a fake dog body for the film. Trying to remember what else. But while I was there, I worked my ass off. I made a point of working, it's sort of a simple formula for me is I look at who the most hardworking person in the shop is, and I want to keep up with them or try to work harder than they do. I don't go into any new gig, find the laziest person that's there and think, okay, as long as I'm not as lazy as them, then I'll be okay. Because you're not making yourself valuable at all. So the one compliment that Paul Jones gave me was, you're really conscientious with my money. And I thought that was a really nice thing to say. He might not have meant it that way, but for myself, it was, I just said, yes, that's, I don't want to waste material. Even though I'm not paying for it, it just doesn't sit well with me. So I just worked really hard. So the next project that came up, he would call me, and then he did. So I would work on more shows with Paul. I got to work on the Resident Evil films. I got to work on some television stuff with him. So it was really valuable, to sort of make that first impression really helps. And, for most effects companies, it's a guy, it's a guy who started a company. So you have to sort of, think of a person and a personality and a character that you have to sort of, ingratiate yourself with in order to get that gig. There are a lot of people with a lot of the same skills, but like any industry, you can find people who are really unpleasant, who are really skilled, and you can find people who aren't as skilled but are really pleasant to work with. Well, in the end, you're going to probably end up wanting to work with the people that are pleasant to work with versus, the divas in any industry.
Yeah.
So that was, for me, that was a simple kind of process. But at the time, it was a lot of work, a lot of legwork, and really just the drive to get somebody to kind of notice what I was doing.
Awesome, that's great. That's some really great advice. Thank you, Anthony. We just had a question
Thank
here
you.
from our audience. I'm not sure if you see any of them, but what are your thoughts on the next generation of FX artists that are learning and sharing through YouTube and online tutorials and that? Do you see any of your peers or anybody kind of creating stuff online that you've watched?
Yeah, we do. A lot of times, some of the younger people that I work with, they know much more about that than I do. I'm not watching too many tutorials, but the sort of plus and minus of that is that they're creating a lot of the work in these vlogs, these tutorials literally for that photograph, for that end result. It won't stand up to filming a 12-hour day. So that part is really different. Doing an amazing sort of face painted makeup that looks real or looks like another character. There's so many talented artists out there who are doing like amazing face paints where, looking just like Johnny Depp from Pirates of the Caribbean. But as soon as they turn their head left or right, it doesn't read anymore. It works perfectly for that straight on shot, that finish, that, what do they call that? The thumbnail. But that's not makeup that's functional for theater or makeup that's functional for film or screen. So that part of it is very different. The face-off shows and things like that came out, they're not really trained to work on set. They're sort of given a very unrealistic idea that if they did get hired on a production that they'd be in charge, which they wouldn't be. They'd have to work their way up like anyone else. So it's cool to watch, and I do end up in the rabbit hole of YouTube videos myself and kind of like, wow, that's really awesome. But how it translates to a real industry and a full-time gig is very different. How it translates obviously to somebody, getting millions of likes and actually getting paid to produce content, that's great. It's not working in film or television or theater, it's working for YouTube.
Yes. Of
so
course.
that part I get it. It's not something that I find appealing. I didn't get into this to be on camera. I did this so that I could work on people who were on camera.
Of course. And so a great question. Just a reminder to our audience as well that we've only got about 15 minutes left with Anthony, so feel free to add some questions to the chat and we'll see if we can get to them. But so speaking about working with actors, is there a particular actor that was kind of the most fun to work with for you? And can you tell the audience, what it takes working with an actor? Like, are you sitting with them for 4 or 5 hours a day before they even start shooting? Like, what's that kind of process?
Yeah, our call is usually earlier than anyone else's. So we're there just to set up before the actors show up. And then the rest of the crew is setting up the shot, whereas we've got the actor. So, there's obvious, the usual polite etiquettes, don't smoke before, if you are a smoker, don't smoke before your actor shows up because you're going to be breathing on them. You're 4 inches from their face. Make sure your hands are washed and clean so they don't smell, and that your nails are clean because you're right in their face, right? And in some cases it's early in the morning and everybody's senses are pretty sharp at that point in the morning. So you have your actor and you tend to make normal polite conversation that anyone would make, and you have you have what you have to do that day. You have your brief that you're given, like it's this part of the script, it's at this point, the character looks like this. So that's what you start working with. And, you're usually in a makeup trailer. Sometimes it's you and 2 other makeup artists and 2 other actors, really depending on the shoot. The most fun I've had, I think, is working with Eddie K. Thomas was amazing. He was so on every day, and he had great stories because his background was theater and musicals, and his partner at the time was also an actress. She came by to visit. There was more stories being swapped, so you get to be a fly on the wall and hear, you get to hear the gossip sometimes from the source. when I met Jared Butler on 300. That was a real treat. He wasn't as famous during production of that film than obviously than he became later, but he, shook my hand and said, yeah, welcome to the crew, call me Jerry. It's a really fun group, great to have you aboard. And his tone through the film set the tone for everybody else. We kind of joke about it, but if the captain of the ship is a miserable sod, then it goes down the line and everybody, it's a chore to work. But if the captain of your ship, which is usually your star, is a great person and loves what they're doing, you'll do anything for them. And the enjoyment factor just doubles, you know what I mean? So those are probably, I would say, when I think about probably the two of the bigger actors that I've worked with. When I worked on Land of the Dead, I got to say hi to Aria Argento, and I got to say hi to Dennis Hopper, and I had lunch across from John Leguizamo. But that was a perfect example of you've got your hour for lunch, you're shooting nights, everybody's tired, you're hungry, you got the food, and it's great food usually. And so I've got this big plate of food in front of me, and right across from me sits John Leguizamo, and I'm thinking, this guy's amazing, what a great actor, comedian, he's worked on so many films I've seen. And literally you kind of look up, you nod, you eat, he nods, he eats, then you leave, and then he leaves. So, you're literally like, yeah, we're working. This is working. As much as I would love to have fanned out or anything, you don't usually have that opportunity. So, so that part I think is fun when people say, oh, you got to work on, did you meet? And it's like, well, I saw them and they were working and I was working, and, you nod politely and hold the door for somebody, like Mila Jovovich's stunt double. I got to cast her teeth, but this woman is also stunted for hundreds of other, actresses, and she was awesome and really fun. And, when you are casting an actor, it's a little more intimate. So, we recently cast the actress Daisy Ridley of Star Wars fame, and awesome lady, and I had to make a mold of her feet for an upcoming production. So, it's hard to kind of keep your serious tone, but at the same time, you do have a job which has step 1 through 5 that you have to get done in order. And, you have to kind of play along, and she was really pleasant to work with, so, and I'm sure for her as an actress, it's just as weird sitting on a table and having some stranger rub material all over your toes as it is for me to be, on my knees rubbing material all over Daisy Ridley's toes. Yeah.
Of course, yeah. No, of course, that's great. Anthony, we're just getting a few questions, and I have one too about it. So just kind of to speak to our audience for student film productions and kind of no budget productions and everything, but like kind of just a couple questions here. So, I mean, what's the most basic makeup element that a student can use in their film? Or how would you recommend a student put makeup effects in a movie that don't have access to somebody like you? And I know that we were going to share kind of a home home blood recipe or something, so I don't know if you want to get into that now, but yeah, what are some things that students can do to kind of elevate their productions a little bit with not a lot of materials?
Right. As I said earlier, it's like something as simple as changing the eyes, changing the teeth, changing posture, changing hair. Those are pretty simpler and cheaper things to do. Obviously, the contact lens thing is, it's important that you get that done properly and have your character, your actor's eyes measured before you buy any contacts or anything, but that's a whole other ballgame. So it's those subtle changes. I mean, obviously blood is effective, and it is like one of the simplest makeup effects to do. There's an older material called mortician's wax, which is just a sculptable wax that is flesh colored and slightly translucent. It's something that a lot of people can do. It's it's great for cuts and wounds and things like that. Don't discount highlights and shadows. So being able to paint onto an actor's face, that can be really helpful as well. Can really help to change a character just with highlights and shadows. To do a good bruise or a black eye, you don't need prosthetics for that. You just need a knowledge of color and how to put that makeup on. A lot of the makeup now that is becoming sort of standard is it's called an alcohol-based makeup, and it goes on with alcohol, and it's almost like a liquid plastic. So it lasts much longer than a cream makeup or grease paint kind of makeups or beauty makeups. So that is sort of always the first step, And again, in your script, you can write it in, but you can cheat things as well by you don't have to show the gunshot. You can have a before and after.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a quick cutaway. You can have a flash of light, and then the actor can already have the bullet hole, painted or sculpted with the mortician's wax, and then you show the after effect. Mm-hmm. The early Friday the 13th movies were perfect for that. They'd have the real actor and a real sword, and then they'd have the fake sword and a real actor, and then they'd have the dummy head and a real sword, and then they'd have the actor with a cutaway sword, or machete buried in their head, and you're like, you saw something, but it wasn't there. Psycho is the perfect example. Like when Janet Leigh's character gets stabbed in the shower, the knife never touches her body, mm-hmm. but your brain says it does because it was shot well. So in a lot of cases, again, with no budget and so on, that's where you're going to start. Once you get a little bit of money, then you can buy a lot of ready-made prosthetics. There's a lot more companies now that are selling ready-made prosthetics that are a little more generic and will fit most actors. You can buy like the Buffy, the old Buffy the Vampire Slayer vampire brow. Most effects places that sell the materials have that in stock. So there's that end of it as well. But that's when you do need to start to learn a little bit about the application of stuff and how to paint them and things like that. So, put the call out. Mm-hmm. I think that's key, right? I know even for myself here locally, people will get in touch with me, and I love it. If I can help them, I help them. And I always say, it's as long as it doesn't cost me money, then I'll do what I can to help out a small production. Mm-hmm. And most people who love what they do like this will try to find a way to help somebody out when they can. But again, it comes down to your script, right? If it's integral to the part, then you're going to figure out a way to get there. If it's not, then that's when you realize you can edit it out and it's not as vital. And if it can be edited out, then it wasn't needed in the first place. So yeah, it's like I said, it's hard to explain,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
if I were writing a script, do you write the script with the intentions of having $1 billion to spend, or do you write it knowing you've got, $180 to blow on effects?
Yeah, no, exactly. That makes a lot of sense for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony, we did have a question from one of our educators, Christine, and this goes to kind of back to what you were talking about. But where can are there any teaching resources, or these supply kits, or these kits that you speak of? Where are they found? Are they found at costume stores? Are they specific effects makeup stores? I'm sure you have access to some companies that are a little more specialty
Mm-hmm.
stores. But where would some educators be able to kind of find some of that stuff?
Yeah, the simplest thing right away. Yes, there aren't as many theatrical supply stores left anymore, just because it's a dwindling thing. Sculpture Supply Canada, located in Toronto, they carry a really good line of the equipment and materials that we use. They also sell some of smaller kits that are designed for students for learning. It's a company called Smooth On products, and they're the ones who put together some of these smaller kits. There's another company in Toronto called SkyCon, which carries an amazing amount of makeup and effects makeup, from huge $1,000 barrels of silicone to small little kits and colors. So the kits are like a silicone wound kit, so it comes with everything you need just to practice, to learn how to make some little silicone wounds on somebody that are reusable. Mm-hmm. So those sort of kits anymore, some of the bigger companies, Mayron was a big one, Ben Nye, they also carry makeup kits, which used to be designed for an actor, so an actor could have their kit, so they could practice their makeup, for a character. So they were theatrical kits designed for them back probably in the 70s, basically, but the process is the same. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting to try to find stuff from these different suppliers. Right now, sort of everything's online. There's very little sort of brick and mortar shops anymore that you would go into and be like, I'm doing this production, I need to buy this kit. But again, these online companies are more than happy when you get in touch with them to say, this is what it all comes down to the end. It's what's it for? What's the end result that you're looking for? Once you can explain that to them, most of us will know how to get there and help you get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Anthony, one quick question. Are there any new techniques or effects that you're looking forward to using in the future in the makeup industry?
It's interesting. There's been a lot more 3D printing going on now. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more of the digital 3D printing. So there's a neat combination of that. So if you're working on a makeup and something like a Borg or something where there has to be really technical, mechanical parts integrated into your makeup, you can sculpt them by hand and use, different materials. But now you can 3D print that stuff, which is pretty cool. And even making molds of things now, you can 3D print a mold. So it's the amazing world of sculpting something, physically, digitizing it, refining it digitally, and then almost reversing it. And it's all, done as a digital process, reversing it and then printing the mold out and being able to pour your material in that to get a positive.
Okay.
So that whole process now is really sort of coming to light. More and more people are willing to experiment with it. So a few productions I've worked on recently, there's been some 3D printing. We did one recently where it was a film with Joaquin Phoenix that's coming up, and they had scanned his hands and then literally just sent the scan data to, it was done in California, and they sent the scan data to Toronto, and then from Toronto, he printed it up on his printer. And it was amazing, like the process,
Mm-hmm.
But because the technology is still working, the scan was awful. It looked like a rubber glove. It didn't catch any detail and so on, which was kind of funny because then it went back to, okay, we're going to cast someone's hands the old-fashioned way so we can produce fake hands. And, so we pretty much negated the whole digital process just because technologically it isn't as refined as it needs to be yet.
Sure.
So we're excited about it, but, when it comes to time and budget and money, you're like, let's just use what we know.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. So quickly, Anthony, we don't have too much time, but I'm wondering if you could share the fake blood recipe that
I will show.
For our audience at home.
These are, I can hold them up and you can see the main ingredients right away. This is a clear corn syrup. And I love the product placement. We all know what No Frills products look like.
Uh-huh.
Great. And then from that one, this is the second ingredient, my favorite ingredient, which is, where am I here? There we go. Chocolate milk mix.
Okay.
So, another, very economical product. And then we have from your local dollar store, just a nice big bottle of red food coloring.
Perfect.
So what you're doing is you're mixing the corn syrup with the chocolate syrup with the food color. The chocolate syrup helps to make it more opaque because blood is a little opaque. It's not overly translucent. You can see through it a little bit when it's thin. Mm-hmm. But by just using those three materials alone, and again, you can buy it in bulk, which is great. You're not buying these tiny little bits that you have to figure out. And then from that, you mix them up and you make your colors. And in this case, I use my handy little mustard container here. Mm-hmm. And you can see when we pour the blood out, you end up with a pretty realistic tone that reads, dark and kind of creepy. And basically, like I said, that's three ingredients. Sometimes I'll add, in the case of this one, I think I probably added a drop or two of green food color and a drop or two of a blue food color. It just takes the blood into a different direction, but it has a nice realistic look. it's sticky as hell.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to consider that, if you're getting it all over your hands, you're going to end up stuck to things.
Mm-hmm.
But it couldn't be simpler when you think about it. One of the fun things, I'll throw this in there, what we've done in film when I worked on Land of the Dead, I got to be blood boy for a day and just playing with different bloods so they could digitally scan them. And we took bananas, and we would take a banana and you'd squish a banana,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd put it in with your blood and you'd squish it all together. When you throw that onto a wall, it looks like brain matter.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
the perfect, it's the perfect sort of replica for brain matter.
Yeah, I'm sure it's disgusting.
White bread, bananas, and fake blood.
Awesome.
Looks great.
Cool. That's great. Perfect. That's awesome, Anthony. Sorry, we just have to wrap up now. We're kind of at the end of our discussion stuff. But I want to thank you very much for sharing all your expertise with us today, taking the time to, share the techniques and everything that you do. I think it's a really exciting career that you're involved in, and I know that every time we cross paths here in London that we talk about it and I ask you what you're working on and all kind of stuff, and it's super exciting. Mm-hmm. So I just want to thank you and thank our audience for being here today. And we're just going to wrap up. I just want to let our audience know that we have the Forest City Youth Film Festival in-person award show and screening happening on October the 21st here at Wolf Performance Hall in London, Ontario. We do have a live stream of the event that'll be happening that night, and we're going to show you a bit of a screen that has our website that you can go and register for tickets if you want to take a look at the show. And we have 29 short films that are competing for awards that night, and it should be a really spectacular event, so hoping that everybody can kind of tune in and check it out. And thanks again for being here. We really appreciate everybody's time.